Okay. Oh, I suppose I got some music going over here. Dark. Oh. Should I make that bigger? Good morning. Welcome to book club. We're starting in a couple of minutes. I'm attempting to get music playing. It's a slow morning. Slow Sunday morning. Good morning, good morning. Let's see. We got some Guilty as Sin. That's our biggest. We're talking about The Shining this morning. Read The Shining. Also watched the movie, relating it to Tortured Poets, Taylor Swift. Stick around. It's going to be fun. We're going to be talking a lot about the movie. I think most people are familiar with the movie. I have my axe in a clown head mug in honor of Jack Nicholson. So, I think it's gonna be good. I think it's gonna be good. Hopefully, I don't know. It's just gonna be me talking for an hour. But I'm making a bunch of connections to Taylor Swift, to Tortured Poets. Taylor makes a lot of connections to the movies. I was hoping there'd be a little bit more connections to the book. There's still a ton, but I think most people know the movie anyway. Do we even need music? I probably don't. We got 2 minutes until we officially start. I accidentally scheduled this live for tomorrow, thinking that the 28th was today. It's not. Today's the 27th, in case anybody is interested. Okay, we got 2 minutes, so they'll be nice and quick. Give you some background. I'm interested to see what you guys have to think too, because it's The Shining. Doesn't everybody know The Shining? I have my glitter sparkles on. They're not the same ones as that Taylor had at the game. I bought these on Amazon like 5 years ago for my 30th birthday, and I had everybody wear them at the party. I had them like go put them on as they arrived, which is a fun thing to do if you're ever throwing a party. So yeah, it's Halloween. This is also, they're good to like wear to the office if like on Halloween, because like if you're like me and you love Halloween, like you're not gonna go in full costume, but like you want to do something. So the glitter sparkles are good for that. Lovely. Wow. Okay, we're gonna start. I don't know, 30 seconds. We need like the Eras Tour countdown, Midnight's Clock. I got this from Fright Fest. It was a few years ago, but just like Six Flags. I always love their Fright Fest merch. And I got this a couple years ago there. All right. It's 10:30. We're getting started. We've got people. Welcome. I feel like it's dark in here. Oh, because my light isn't on. Hold on. You gotta get the Alex Earl light going. That's better. Okay, perfect. I know it's spooky season, but we need some light. Hi everyone. If you are new here, this is the Tortured Poets Book Club. I am your chairman. My name is Ange, your chairwoman, if you will. This is the Tortured Poets No Reading Required Book Club, and this month I read The Shining for you. Some people read along. It's an all-inclusive book club. You can learn about all the connections to Taylor Swift and why Taylor is making references through me as I read for you. So if you have not joined the book club, it's all just right here on TikTok. There's no subscriptions or anything. I'm just here to share my knowledge with you. So, The Shining. Why are we reading The Shining? So one of the things that I did was I made a full list of all of the book references that Taylor makes throughout Tortured Poets. And it took way longer than I thought it was going to. It took me like 3 weeks. There are over 50 books on the list. There's a free list of that, and it's just in like a Google Drive. In the link in my bio, if anyone is interested. Also a great Christmas present, just FYI. It's coming up. If you have a reader that likes Taylor Swift. And we read The Shining because it's spooky season. But there are many more reasons why we read The Shining, which is, where I'm going to start, kind of like what tipped me off, why are we reading it in the first place. So Guilty as Sin is like the song that is most closely aligned to The Shining. And I actually have here for you my personal journal and notebook, because as I was prepping for this the other day, I remembered that the first time I listened to Tortured Poets, it was like so much to process. I got my notebook out and I started just like writing things down to like process it better. And I was like, I wonder if I wrote something about The Shining. And I did. Day 1, April 19th, I wrote Hedge Maze, The Shining and Harry Potter, Oh What a Way to Die. And I was like, wow, I think this is where it all started. So Guilty as Sin, the line about the hedge maze, unfortunately, there's not a hedge maze in the actual book. There are a lot of differences between the book and the movie. I actually think Taylor references the movie more closely than the book. There's still a ton here, which is not, the worst thing in the world, because I think that's what people are familiar with. But we are going to go through the lyrics of Guilty as Sin, because there are a lot of connections there. There are also connections to a lot of the other songs, like the actual title track of the Tortured Poets Department. The main character, Jack Torrance, he's a writer, and he uses a typewriter. It's a very big part of the play, him having writer's block and his experience as a writer. So we're going to talk about how that might parallel to Taylor as a writer. There's more here to talk about that like I could ever fit into an hour, but I'm going to try to talk about what I find, I guess, the most interesting. So, a number of different reasons. We have the typewriter aesthetic, we have Guilty as Sin. Jack Torrance is a tortured poet himself. We're going to do like a little synopsis of just like what the movie is and what happens and what the book is and what happens, just so you have the context behind like what some of these connections are. But Taylor is a tortured poet. Stephen King, also a tortured poet. Stephen King wrote this book back in, I think it was 1977. Listen to the connection that I just made. I only just figured this out in the shower. Guilty as Sin, if you had to, I know we don't like to paternity test, if you had to tie Guilty as Sin to one guy or one relationship, it's probably Maddie Healy. Tortured Poets, typing on a typewriter, madman with a typewriter, Maddie Healy. The Shining takes place in 1975. I learned that this morning, and I was like, oh my God, how did I not realize that before? So that's fun. Stephen King is a torture poet himself. So part of the premise of the book, and we'll go a little bit more detailed in a bit. Good morning. First time on live. Oh, amazing. Welcome. There's some good stuff out there. Yeah, live is good to have on if you're just like doing chores or just like I don't know, doing your makeup or something in the morning. You can't like scroll through TikTok. So one of the main reasons that Stephen King wrote this book is he was inspired by his stay at a hotel. We're going to talk a lot about isolation, Taylor's periods of isolation as well. Stephen King, also a tortured poet. He struggled with alcoholism and assumingly writer's block. He writes himself into a lot of his characters. I think Jack Torrance is like a very personal character that he wrote himself into. Because he was also struggling with alcoholism, also getting frustrated with writer's block, getting frustrated with interruptions from his family, and he goes to stay at this hotel in Colorado, which is called the Stanley Hotel, which looks like beautiful, by the way. And he is the last person to check out of the hotel, and so he gets this idea of like, what happens to the last guest that stays at the hotel, or what happens to the last person that's just alone in a hotel. And this entire story, this ghost story, is born. And, I think that's very close to what Taylor does in her music too, right? Like, he didn't necessarily experience the ghost story. What he writes about isn't like word for word what happens in his life, but I think a lot of his characters are semi-autobiographical in the same way that Taylor writes her semi-autobiographical songs. Like, we can, I guess, pick and choose what we choose to believe of what exactly happened in her life versus not, but I'm sure a lot of it is inspiration. So there's that. What else? I actually just learned about the interview that Stephen Colbert did with Taylor Swift. Anytime I see clips of that interview, they're always clips of the pizza collage. And I had no idea that they had done a whole bit about, like, Stephen Colbert trying to get Taylor Swift to admit that Hey Stephen is about him. And she ends up saying that it's about Stephen King. And she mentions The Shining specifically. She talks about the Dark Tower series, The Shining. And I was like, oh my God, we're literally reading this right now. And I had no idea that she had actually even acknowledged its existence. And while I don't think that song is actually like professing her love for Stephen King romantically, we are going to go through the lyrics because I do think that it is inspired by The Shining after reading The Shining. So we have that. Stephen King tweeted saying that he was a Swiftie just about a month ago. Stephen King connects all of his books into one giant multiverse in the same way that Taylor connects all of her songs into like one giant Taylor Swift universe. And the movie kind of actually took on a life of its own. So like in a similar way to like how we listen to Taylor and try to find all the Easter eggs and the connections, Stephen King fans read his novels and find all of the connections between each of his books. So for example, you guys are probably familiar with Misery, the Kathy Bates movie. In Misery, in that book, Stephen King references the Overlook Hotel, which is the name of the hotel that Jack and his family go to. And so I don't think Taylor would reference Stephen King without actually, she wouldn't just reference anybody for the hell of it. Like, she's not going to reference somebody that she doesn't respect. She's not going to say she loves someone that she doesn't even respect. So I do feel like she does still, like, live in this world. What else? I think those are the big ones. The movie actually, I do think is aligned, like I said, more closely to Taylor's references, like the hedge maze being one of them. But another thing that I was just thinking about this morning, so this might not be like the most organized thought I've ever had, but one of the things I was thinking about this morning is like one of the themes of Tortured Poets being kind of highlighting artists who are not recognized for their work right away. A lot of the artists that she refers to don't get recognition for what they've done, or their talent is discredited not until like many, many years later. Sometimes not until after they die. And that's a very simplified version of like why I think she says her own name at the end of Clara Bow at the end of the album. But the movie was very much like that. Like the movie adaptation was very much like that. The movie came out, Stephen King hated the movie, which is probably why a lot of people didn't go see it. It was still very profitable, but it wasn't until years later that like the director was touted as like one of the best directors of all time. Once people got on the internet and they started talking about it and like finding connections, it kind of took on a life of its own. And people were finding like literally like numerology in the patterns in the carpets of the hotel. There were all these conspiracy theories about the movie actually being about how the moon landing was fake. Like just things that like are not even addressed in the movie, but have just completely taken on a life of its own. And I do think that there is a commentary. Yes, Rachel, amazing. Love that you're here. I think that there is this commentary on like an author's intended work and then people just taking it and completely twisting the entire meaning of it. And it must be infuriating to see your work actually be so successful, but it's not what you intended it to be. And we definitely do that. Like, we know that we do that. We know that there are some theories that we probably have like dead on with Taylor, and there are probably theories, not probably, there are definitely theories that are just way off of the mark, completely wild, where she's probably watching our videos and being like, what the hell? I will never shut up about the Kubrification of the King. Yeah, it's, he hated it. He hated the adaptation. And I think one of the main reasons too is, this is kind of my interpretation, but I know one of the main reasons is because the character Jack, right, our tortured poet of The Shining, has a much deeper history. It is never talked about in the movie at all, right? Like, in the movie, Jack is just, he's immediately this crazy person that you hate. And don't get me wrong, I don't like Jack Torrance in the book either, but you have more information, right? Like, he comes from an abusive family. He sees his father treat, his kids and his wife the same way that he now treats Wendy and his son Danny. And I think if this character is someone that King put a little bit more of his own self into, I can see changing that being like really offensive. I can see it being really offensive. Which again goes back to that like autobiographical part of like what he writes. As I also think about like Stephen King and Taylor Swift, I keep thinking of that clip. I have no idea what it's from. But of Taylor going to Maine and she like falls in love with it and she's like, I wrote 20 songs about Maine on the way over here and they're all called I Love Maine. I don't know, it's just what I think of. A crazy mind. I don't know if I want to meet him. I'm too scared. I'm a scaredy cat. He's probably a very interesting person to sit down with. And it does make me wonder if like part of Taylor's Easter egg game that she does was born out of other artists doing these types of like multiverse things. Okay. Synopsis. Quick. Can I see your coaster? Yes, I'm so glad that you asked. I have, hold on. My cousin bought me these. I think they're like from Etsy. Because the Love Her Live from Paris vinyls are probably never something that I will actually own. And she bought from Etsy these little Love Her Live from Paris coasters. They're the fucking cutest things I've ever seen. Again, great Christmas gift. I have no idea where they're from, but I don't know. Do a Google. I'm sure you can find them. They're adorable. I have like the most thoughtful people in my life. Okay, synopsis. Because you're going to need to know the background if you don't know. Our torture poet, Jack Torrance, he and his family moved to Colorado. He actually was an English teacher. He's a writer and an English teacher, which again puts us much more into like the torture poet's world than the book ever does. Than the movie ever does. The movie actually makes you kind of question, like, is this guy even a writer at all? But he is like, actually has talent in the book. And he's an alcoholic. His son Danny calls his drinking the bad thing, and that's going to be important when we get into the guilty as sin lyrics. He is like nearing losing his family, and one of the reasons being that he actually like breaks Danny's arm, which is not okay. He gets sober. He's sober for like 18 months and he has like a rage problem as well. Like, of course, he ends up injuring a student, which I think is interesting because when he does injure the student, he is sober at this point. And like one of my biggest questions, like the lens that I read this book through is like, how much of Jack's behavior is him just being an evil, shitty person? How much of it is like mental health? And how much of it is actually the hotel manipulating him because the hotel is like evil and trying to kill everybody. I'm very worried that this like TikTok feed is going to get censored somehow talking about the events of The Shining. So I'll try to be careful. He interestingly taught a course called American Poets in a school back in Vermont, gets fired from his job, and like the only job he can get is being the caretaker of this hotel that is like completely isolated from the rest of the world. It's so far up into the mountains in Colorado, the roads are impassable, and they basically just need someone to keep the place heated over the winter. So they moved to Colorado. Danny has a son named, Danny is Jack's son. Danny has The Shining, and like that's what The Shining is like the ability to see past the physical realm, to see the supernatural. So like one, he can telepathically communicate with other people who have The Shining, who like also have these gifts and talents. He can read other people's minds. He can see what things are going to happen in the future, and he can also see the past, which is just like seeing ghosts, which there are a lot of in the hotel. And then there's Wendy, which I love the name Wendy because everything that we read in Tortured Poets Book Club always leads back to Peter Pan. And of course, like, why wouldn't her name be Wendy? They all move out to Colorado. Danny and Jack start seeing the ghost of the hotel. Danny is definitely seeing the ghost. Jack is like, he's unable to delineate like what is real versus what is not. As they get to the hotel, they meet the chef who also shines, and he realizes that like Danny has the shining and is gonna see a lot of like real effed up stuff over the winter. So he like helps Danny understand what the shining is, and he explains that like the visions and things that he's going to be seeing, or the things that he's seeing in the hotel, are not real. He describes them as pictures on a page, right? Just like an illustration book. You see them, but they're not real. They can't hurt you. Jack doesn't have that background. I think Jack does have like a little bit of a shining himself. They say that like a lot of people do, but they don't realize it. And so when Jack starts to see these things, he starts to question his reality and if he's going mad. I was questioning it the entire time. And it starts to drive him crazy, and it makes him very vulnerable to the evil of the hotel. And the hotel wants Danny dead. The hotel wants to consume Danny's shine so it can be more powerful. And it sets Jack after his family to go attack them. Yeah, the book is wildly different from the movie. So I finished the book last week. I watched the movie Friday night. And wildly different. We'll talk about all of it, but I do think it's important because like when you talk about like what Taylor is referencing, a lot of it is in the movie, like dying in the hedge maze. Jack dies in a hedge maze. That doesn't happen in the book, so we do have to talk about it. I don't know which one I like better, honestly. I think, well, I like the book better, but the imagery from the movie is just so iconic. It's so good. Okay, at the end of the book, here's how the book ends. And I don't consider this a spoiler because this book is from the 70s. The book and the movie are cult classics. If you don't know what happens by now, I'm doing you a favor by knowing how it ends. My glitter freckles are not the Fazit ones. They're just from Amazon. I purchased these like a pack like 5 years ago for my 30th birthday party. And they just have lasted forever. So I do want the Fazit ones. I'm starting to run low. These ones are butterflies. You can't really see them when I sit far away. So the way that the movie ends, right, one of the reasons why Jack is there is to keep the hotel heated. And the boiler, which is a thing that keeps the hotel heated, is like this very old boiler. It doesn't work properly, and it builds a ton of pressure that needs to be released constantly. Otherwise, it will explode. And the way that the movie ends is Danny has this vision that the whole place is going to explode. Jack is like on a rampage trying to attack everyone, and he forgets about his caretaker responsibilities. And he doesn't get to the boiler in time. So Danny and Wendy get out of the hotel. The chef, like, telepathically knows that something wrong is happening. He comes to help save them. And Jack and the entire hotel explode. Wendy kills Jack, actually, before that happens, which I think is so interesting because, you know, if the ghosts are all attacking the humans, she kills him with a knife, and he just looks at her and he's like, "You killed me, Wendy." But even if he's a ghost now, he can still attack everybody, so he continues his rampage. It's really good. It's really, really good. It's way different from the movie because in the movie, it doesn't, like, the hotel doesn't explode. Danny runs out into the hedge maze. Jack gets lost in the hedge maze and he just freezes to death, and he becomes like a new ghost to join the masquerade party at the hotel. So very, very different. I mean, he ends up dying either way and like haunting the hotel either way, but the explosion is really important. It's really important when you think about the Eras Tour. It's really important when you think about the Lover house burning down. Like, there is a parallel there, no doubt in my mind. We'll talk all about it. Okay. The lens that I read this book through was born out of a couple of things. One, in Guilty as Sin, like the main line that I would think of from Guilty as Sin is, I'm seeing visions, am I bad or mad or wise? And that's what I've been trying to figure out with Jack Torrance the entire time. Is he bad? Is he evil? Is it the bad thing, which is his drinking, that is just making him behave the way that he is? And we have proof of that because he was previously an alcoholic. He attacked a student. He's not a great guy from the beginning. I think Stephen King tries to like give you a background to have a little bit more sympathy for them, but like he was out with me from the very beginning. Is he mad? Is he actually losing his mind, or does he have like actually a mental health illness that is causing him to see hallucinations, right? Like there are very real things like that where people have like manic episodes or any sort of diagnosis that can like lead them to feeling like they're losing touch with reality and need to seek help. Or am I wise? And I'm really interpreting like the wise aspect as The Shining, as the ability to see these ghosts, to see events from the past, to communicate telepathically. And the whole time that I read the book, not only did I have that line in my head, but Stephen King gives this disclaimer at the beginning of the book. And I know I made a video on this already, but it is worth revisiting because it is the thing I was thinking of the entire time. So before the book even starts, Stephen King gives a disclaimer, which I thought was really interesting because like the disclaimer is all about how this book is just fiction. And it's like, yeah, it's a novel, it's a fiction book, it's a horror book. Like we know, why do we need a disclaimer? He says, some of the most beautiful resort hotels in the world are located in Colorado, but the hotel in these pages is based on none of them. The Overlook, which is the name of the hotel, the Overlook and the people associated with it exist wholly within the author's imagination. Not only that, but if you look at it, it's like kind of written like a poem. Like it has this weird indent in here. I literally wrote like, why is it written like this? And again, like thinking about the Tortured Poets department, like why is it written like a poem? It just like, it draws attention for something that shouldn't really even need to be there. Like, hey, this is fictional. So I think, you know, initial interpretation is like, okay, this horror novel exists wholly within Stephen King's mind, and the hotel doesn't exist. And so, you know, the Stanley Hotel doesn't need to worry about their reputation because this is the Overlook. It's a different hotel. But I think it's a red herring in the same way that Taylor Swift gave us red herring with Tortured Poets, right? Like the first listen upon Tortured Poets, it's very easy, right? We all immediately paternity test what song is which. Upon first listen, we think that songs are about Maddie and Joe, and that's it. But if you take those away, if you think about red herring and say, okay, our first interpretation is not actually what the author is intending, like what else lies underneath. And that led me to thinking, okay, Stephen King, not the only tortured poet in this story. Jack Torrance is the main tortured poet. The Overlook and the people associated with it exists wholly within the author's imagination. So which author's imagination? Jack Torrance's imagination? I'm a little biased, I really wanted Jack to be mad and bad. I didn't want the hotel and the supernatural aspects of the hotel to give us a reason to excuse his behavior. The hotel is actually haunted, and it does have like manipulation powers over him, and I kind of hate that. I really just want to hate him as a person, but that's my own cross to bear. There's also some like double meanings in these words too. Holy, for example, like thinking of Guilty as Sin. There's a lot of lyrics there. What if the way you hold me is actually what's holy? Like if there are double meanings. The Overlook Hotel, right? Overlook can very much be seen as like the view that you have from the mountains, but it could also mean like what are people overlooking in the hotel? What is happening inside of this hotel that people aren't paying attention to? So the whole time I'm just trying to figure out, is Jack bad or mad or wise? I think it's all three. Some other like interesting things too, like there are a couple of quotes that he puts in, which is like not unusual for an author to do. There's a whole excerpt from The Masque of the Red Death, which is written by Edgar Allan Poe, another tortured poet. In the book, there's this like haunted masquerade ball that all of the ghosts are going to. And at midnight, there's a big midnight's presence. At midnight, they all take off their masks. And so throughout the book, midnight is approaching and they're hearing the voices of the ghosts going, unmask, unmask. And what's so interesting too is that like the main mask that they focus on, I wrote it down somewhere, but I'm just going to tell you from memory. It is a black silk cat eye mask that is like bedazzled with sequins. And if that is not the most Taylor Swift masquerade ball mask that I have ever heard as midnight approaches, I'm just saying, it's hard to ignore. The other thing that he has here is it'll shine when it shines. And it's a folk saying, like it's not attributed to a specific person. So now I'm already thinking folklore. And in looking up like, well, what does it actually mean? Like it'll shine when it shines. It means that things will work out when the timing is right. Basically, kind of like a commentary on fate. And that brought me to think about the caption that Taylor Swift wrote on Instagram when Tortured Poets came out. And I will read it to you. It says that Tortured Poets is an anthology of new works that reflects events, opinions, and sentiments from a fleeting and fatalistic moment in time. The Shining is touted as a very fatalistic book, and Taylor wants us to think of Tortured Poets as fatalistic as well. I'm gonna be honest. A few weeks ago, I Googled the word fatalistic because I kept thinking the word fatal was like the main part of that word. It's not, it's fate. It's fate. It'll shine when it shines. Things happen for a reason. Things will work out in time. And whatever happens is like what is meant to be is what is meant to happen. She also goes on, I didn't realize how much of her caption was like a, hey, please don't start attacking the men that I've dated in the past. It says, the period of this author's life is now over, the chapter closed and boarded up. There's nothing to avenge, no scores to settle once wounds have healed, and upon further reflection, a good number of them turned out to be self-inflicted. Which is also very Jack Torrance, but I don't know, very interesting. Very interesting. This writer is of the firm belief that our tears become holy. Remember, holy? In the form of ink on a page. Once we have spoken our saddest story, we can be free of it. We haven't even gotten into the book yet. But like really interesting parallels between the two as far as like what their themes are and what they want us to think about and how they want us to not get stuck in like the surface level meanings of things. Okay. What is my background? I am not an English teacher. I'm not a teacher at all. My background is in math. I have a math degree, which is like, in my mind, the opposite of English. I work in finance. I work in personal finance. I like to say that like having a math degree is having a degree in like pattern recognition. Because, I mean, math has a bunch of, like, rules and laws, and if you can just, like, understand how it all connects to each other, it's not as hard, and I understand that math does not make sense to a lot of people. That's just, like, how my brain works. I've just always loved reading and, like, making connections and finding, like, that pattern recognition stuff, and so, like, I'm reading these books, like, through the Taylor Swift lens. So like, you know, when you listen to Taylor Swift nonstop on repeat for just like years and years and years, and you just know her discography so well, like you can explain anything in life in the terms of Taylor Swift. I'm very confident about that. Yeah, it works for breaking down. I don't know exactly why or like how to explain it, but like, but yeah, it's just like, I don't know. It's just like it's just pattern recognition. I don't know. I always loved, I took a couple of like lit classes for just like fun, and I love just like sitting in a circle talking about like the different meanings of books and the themes and the things that we found. And I tried like a couple of different book clubs, but like it was hard to commit to them. So I don't know, this format seems to work for me because it's just like not relying on other people, and I can just talk to you guys, talk to myself. It gives me more to think about on my long drives to work and back, you know? Okay. My next excerpt, we're going to talk about folklore cabin fever. I know I made a video on this as well, and then we're going to get into some of the stuff I just haven't had time to talk about yet. But when Jack and his family go to the Overlook Hotel, the manager is like kind of giving them the rundown, right? He gives them the tour and everything. And he tells Jack that like, hey, just so you know, like usually the caretakers that stay at this place, they stay here alone. We've only had one time that a family has stayed here, and it resulted in tragedy. His name was Grady. Grady comes up in the future, plays a big role as a ghost of the hotel. Grady, his two twin daughters, so like if you picture like any of the imagery of The Shining, you probably think of like the two twin little girls. Those were Grady's kids. His wife was there. And he turned into a family annihilator, and all four of them died. He attacked them very similarly to how Jack starts attacking his family. So he just kind of gives him that as a warning, which is like, I don't know, kind of interesting. I don't know if it's really needed in the book. But he explains what happens to Grady as cabin fever, as the impacts of cabin fever. So he says, cabin fever is a slang term for the claustrophobic reaction that can occur when people are shut in together over long periods of time. The feeling of claustrophobia is externalized as dislike for the people you happen to be shut in with. In extreme cases, it can result in hallucinations and violence. So that's their explanation of like what happened to Grady. Not that the hotel is like haunted and actually can control people, but it's just cabin fever. And like I immediately think of folklore. I immediately think of the folklore cabin, and I immediately think of Taylor's periods of isolation. Taylor has had, I think, two, from what we know, from what we're seen and shown in her world, right? 2 periods of isolation. Isolation is actually a really core theme. I have like 4 themes that are like showing up in every single of like the 50 books that are on this Tortured Poets reading list. And isolation is one of them. So it's really interesting how it shows up here and in her work. And so the 2 kind of big points of isolation in Taylor's life is with Reputation, right? Taylor Swift is over party. She moves to London with Joe, goes into hiding. She says that no one physically sees her for an entire year. Even in dating Joe, right? He wanted a private life. They stayed shut in for like 6 years. Hold on. I have the interview. She literally talks about it in the Time Person of the Year magazine interview. She says, because I want to get my quotes right. This was a long interview. I forget how long this is. She says, I still want to go out to dinner with my friends. Life is short. Have adventures. Me locking myself away in my house for a lot of years. I'll never get that time back. I'm more trusting now than I was 6 years ago. First of all, burn to Joe. I mean, yikes. Poor kid. I don't care. If your ex, any of your exes said that in like a public magazine, oh God. So there's that period of isolation. She also has, I mean, when we were all isolated during COVID, are we comparing TTPD to The Shining? Yes. Welcome to Tortured Poets Book Club. We do a new book every month. It's October, so we're doing The Shining. Where was I? COVID. Okay, so during the Betty speech, is the word I'm looking for, during the Eras tour, she talks about how she was isolated over COVID, how folklore was born. She talks about being, you know, a lonely millennial woman just stuck in her house writing songs. She talks about drinking too much wine, which is very Jack Torrance with an alcohol problem. Not to mention a lot of her songs reference different, you know, references to struggling with alcoholism. And those were like two really big periods of isolation. And if you think about like the excerpt that I just read, I know I keep getting distracted, it can externalize as a dislike for the people you happen to be shut in with. It makes me think about like, how has cabin fever, how has this isolation impacted her work, impacted her feelings towards Joe or other people in her life. And I think about like the songs that they wrote together being like the saddest songs, like Exile. They wrote a song together about isolation called Exile. Exile is isolation. Evermore, which takes place in the winter, which is where The Shining takes place, right? Like Catching My Death, staring out an open window, barefoot in the wildest winter, Danny running through the maze trying to get away from his father. It's just, I don't know, it really stands out to me. And then I wonder, like, has Taylor ever even had writer's block? That girl writes so much. I'm not sure that that's something that she has in common with Stephen King. I don't know that she's ever actually talked about it, because I don't think she's ever experienced it. Is she more Jack or is she more Wendy? Oh my God. The amount of times I have asked myself that, and I gotta say I don't have an answer. I think she's both. I honestly think she's all three characters, which I know sounds insane, but like she is very much Jack. Like that's been established. But like this Wendy character of like, let's talk about Wendy. I'm just gonna skip ahead to the Peter connections quick. So there's always connections to Peter Pan. Wendy in the book describes herself as a wife mother. And she is like the caretaker amongst chaos, which is also very much Wendy and Peter Pan. And very much like if we assume Taylor to be Wendy in the song Peter, if we assume Taylor to be Wendy in Cardigan also, because there's way more connections to Peter Pan and Cardigan than I could ever imagine. I've been finding a lot of them recently. If we assume Taylor to be Wendy, and, you know, part of Wendy's story is that she wanted to be a lost boy. She wanted to, like, do the thing where she could just be carefree, to just be a writer, to be creative. And she seems to have this, like, disdain for, like, having to grow up. And we talked a lot about this in Just Kids, too, because Patti Smith describes herself as Wendy, of never wanting to grow up and like as a woman having to like take on these caretaking responsibilities for the people around her, just kind of out of default. And, you know, keeping promises is something that comes up in The Shining as well. Right, Jack promises to stop drinking. He promises to stop behaving the way that he has, which is like physically injuring his family. And at what point Danny gets injured again, and actually it wasn't him, but he was like blacked out because of the haunting and he thinks it's him, and he goes to Wendy and he's like attempting to apologize for all of this, and he says like, I really thought I could keep my promises, and right, this promise of like I'll be my old self again, and she's just waiting for it to happen and it never does. It's really sad. So anyway, I don't have an answer for your question. I'm so sorry. But that's what comes up in my mind. I think she's more, if I had to pick one, I think she's more Jack. But I think that's why this book is so perfect for the connections, because like, what is she not relating to in all of this? And you know, I keep talking about like the hotel being haunted, and like the physical ghosts in the hotel trying to like, you know, manipulate everything and kill people, but there's very much a commentary on like what are our own ghosts, our own internal ghosts that are haunting us, that we carry around, and how that shows up in our lives. I think you can think about the same thing with folklore cabin fever. Like, COVID had way more of an impact on me than I had thought it had at the time. And like, in reflection, I can see it more clearly, but like, it's something to think about. Like, how did that isolation have an impact on the people that you were maybe stuck with during that time? How do we take out our frustrations on the people that we love the most, which is like a very easy thing to do. So yeah, not to get too dark, which is hard to do in a Tortured Poets book club when you're talking about The Shining. So I'll do my best to not be too dark. The innocence of Danny, the victimhood of Wendy, and the tortured aspects of Jack. Exactly. You summed it up perfectly, better than I could have. Thank you. I'm gonna have to steal that. I'm gonna write that down for when I'm thinking about it later. Yeah, the innocence of Danny being a really big one. Tortured Poets has so much of like this innocence that runs through it. I actually at one point went like song by song on just like, one of my rides to work to try to find an aspect of innocence in like every single song, and particularly in the anthology part of the album. It's everywhere. It's like all over the manuscript. Robin, obviously, being a really big one of that. But even like the references to the kids' books that she has, like Peter Pan, A Wrinkle in Time, The Secret Garden. There's a lot of innocence that she highlights in that. Okay. Where do we want to go next? Time is flying by. This is definitely going to be longer than an hour. That's okay. Let's talk about the Lover House, because, the Overlook Hotel is very much its own character in the book. And it actually reminded me of, we just read Just Kids, and they, Patti Smith lives in the Chelsea hotels, which I thought was kind of interesting. And then Taylor obviously has the folklore cabin, the Lover House being like this, its own character in the Eras tour. And it really is this the visuals of the Lover House being empty and then her burning it down towards the end is the Overlook Hotel. TikTok's telling me I've been on here for too long. Go away. It's very much the Overlook Hotel burning down, and I think they represent very similar things. I made a video on this too, but that's okay. I'm going to talk about it anyway. So the Lover House obviously has all of the different rooms in the different eras, and the two rooms that the manager points out as like being the most important is the attic and the basement. So the attic of the Lover House is the Reputation era, which we've already established is like one of the periods of isolation of like Taylor and Joe going into hiding. They're very worried about rats in the attic, which I think is hilarious, because if you think about Matty Healy and people calling him Ratty, just a fun little quip. No ratties in the Reputation attic allowed. He did get in there though. And then you have the basement, which is important because that's where the boiler room is, and that's how they're gonna like keep the thing heated the whole time. And I was thinking about the Lover House because there is no basement in the Lover House. And so just like kind of doing some Googling, it seems like the general consensus is that if the Lover House had a basement, it would be the vault songs. Which is very interesting because, again, going back to Guilty as Sin, she says, I keep these longings locked in a, what is it? In a, something inside a vault. Hold on, I'll find it. I keep these longings locked inside a, something in a vault. Oh, in lowercase inside a vault. Lowercase, thank you. Everyone's like screaming at their phone. I swear I know these lyrics. Yes, lowercase, thank you. So lowercase because folklore cabin fever. And like, I don't know. I never thought folklore was fake. Like, the first time I listened to folklore, I was like, this is the entire thing. It's about an affair or like a relationship that she's having in her head with someone else, which I think was true. But anyway, if the basement was the vaults, so then I just asked myself, right, like, what would happen if these vault songs got out? If her longings that are locked away actually saw the light of day, what would happen? Would the boiler room blow up? Would the entire Lover house blow up? And it does, right? She actually burns it down. I think it's really interesting because, okay, we start with the Lover house being empty. We know that they moved out of it at the beginning of the Eras tour. The transition into Fearless, the house gets like singed, right? Like all of the sparks come down to start the Fearless era. And then at the end of 1989, we see Taylor walking through the Lover house, and the entire house, like the house is already pretty destroyed in the same way that the Overlook Hotel gets like pretty destroyed before it blows up. It looks singed already. If you haven't looked at that, go back and look at it at a point. So it's already basically falling apart and destroyed when she strikes the match and burns it down. And in the original version of the Eras tour, yes, the surprise song happens after that, but then it goes into Midnights, which is really interesting because guess when the Overlook Hotel blows up? It's at midnight. We get the actual imagery. We get, in the book, Stephen King describes what I picture as the Eras Tour imagery of the clock being just before midnight, that like minute hand being just before midnight, and it's counting down. And the reason that it's counting down to midnight, because remember, the Mask of the Red Death, all of the ghosts are having a haunted masquerade ball, and they're all going to unmask at midnight. And at midnight, meet me at midnight, it all explodes. There's a lot of Alice in Wonderland references in here too. Tons of them. I'm jumping around, but that is okay. We're gonna go, okay. Obviously we know Taylor references Alice in Wonderland a ton. Midnight could tie in with the starting of a new day. A huge rebirth in opera. Yeah, well, it's an opportunity of change for them, for sure. Being subject to Jack's wild ways. Yes, it is. It doesn't have to be the explosion, but in this case it is. For me. So you know how Taylor walks through the mirror, which is definitely a reference to Through the Looking Glass, which is like the sequel of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. Danny literally describes his trances. So Danny has The Shining. He can like see the future. And when he has these visions, he's like kind of like detached from reality, and he has this imaginary friend called Tony. And Tony is the one who tells him the things that are going to happen in the future. And I don't think that Tony is like actually like a person that he sees necessarily. I think that it's his way of like processing the fact that he can see the future, because this kid is 5 years old. So like, he doesn't understand. I don't know that we would understand if we could all of a sudden see the future. Like, he's just trying to explain to himself like what is happening and why he's seeing these things. And he describes these visions, quote, like falling into a deep hole like in Alice in Wonderland. And when he sees Tony on one of these pages, he describes going through the mirror, which is wild. He says, no, Tony was in the mirror way deep down, and then I went through the mirror. Just like Taylor goes through the mirror. Like, what world is she going into? I haven't quite figured that one out yet. Like, is she just going into her eras? The ability to, like, control her eras? The hedge animals as well. So, like, okay, again, Tony is Danny as an older man. Is that what happens? So I haven't read Dr. Sleep. So is that what happens? Okay, there we go. It's in the sequel. Outside of the sequel, that was my interpretation. Yeah, I need to get into that. So I'm gonna let's come back to sleep in a minute because I'm actually interested to hear more of what you have to say on the Dr. Sleep side of things, because there's this whole lucid dreaming connection, and Taylor talks about lucid dreaming and I hate it here. But with the white rabbit in Alice in Wonderland, right, it like represents like anxiety with like time. It represents like some innocence as well. There's no hedge maze, but there are hedge animals, and one of the hedge animals is a rabbit, and because it's winter and it's covered in snow, there is a white rabbit like Alice in Wonderland figure that plays a pretty big role throughout the book, and the hedge animals actually, just like everything else, try to attack them. Okay, so Dr. Sleep is the sequel. What I think is interesting, what stood out to me from a dream perspective, hold on, I have all of these quotes. From a dream perspective, at the end of the book, he says, dream and reality had joined together without a seam. There's so much dream imagery. There's actually an entire chapter where like Jack falls asleep and then a whole bunch of stuff happens and you're kind of left questioning, like, is this what's happening in his dream, or did he wake up from the dream and is now experiencing these things in real life? Like, what is actually real? And the thing that stood out to me is that at the end of the book, they describe, so Wendy kills Jack, but he's still alive as a ghost now, alive as a ghost. There's this thin line between living and dead. And one of the ways that Danny defeats Jack is he looks at him and he says, "You're not my dad," right? Because he's saying, like, this isn't my actual father. This man is possessed by the hotel. It's not a he, it's an it. It's the hotel. So he looks directly at Jack and he says, "You are not my father. Like, you're not real. You're not my father." And he just like stands up to this nightmare figure. In lucid dreaming, which Taylor talks about lucid dreaming, and I hate it here as a form of escape. And I feel like I'm going to talk about lucid dreaming on every live now. I've been lucid dreaming for many years. It's one of my favorite things to do. And one of the ways that you beat nightmares in a lucid dream is you look right at it. And it usually will disintegrate into something that you're actually just much more familiar with. So if you're ever like running from somebody in a dream and you're conscious that like, oh, this is actually a dream, just stop and turn around and look at it, and it will turn into something else. And they describe Jack's face actually like kind of melting away in this moment, which kind of confirms that like he is dead. He is just this mirage. And it makes me wonder, like, is this actually a dream? Because like that is exactly how you would combat that in a lucid dream. And then the actual sequel is called Dr. Sleep. Do we get more clarity on the dream world versus like the haunted world in Dr. Sleep? I don't even know why it's called Dr. Sleep. I haven't quite gotten there. But that is something that I would like to. I've only seen the Dr. Sleep movie. Okay. It's a good disclaimer, but I'll still take information. Yeah, I don't know. Wendy describes Jack as holding conversations with the phantoms in his own crumbling mind. So good. The phantoms of his own crumbling mind. We get so much phantomness out of Tortured Poets as well. Okay. I think we should read the lyrics of Hey Stephen next. They have to sleep to see the future. Okay. Or communicate on a psychic plane. Interesting. Because, I mean, those are kind of like those trances that Danny goes into, but he's not. It doesn't seem like he was sleeping. Like, they made it a really strong point to say that, like, Wendy didn't dream when she slept, and Jack was having the most vivid dreams that he's ever had at the Overlook Hotel, which was like, why go out of your way to say, but remember, Wendy is not seeing anything. Like, she barely shines at all. She can really only see Jack's ghost at the end, like, in a little bit of, like, the ghost party, but not very much. Yeah, it's inconsistent. Okay. Hopefully more clear. Okay. Let's lighten things up a little bit. There's so much more darkness we can talk about. So let's read the lyrics of Hey Stephen, because, like I said at the beginning, while I don't think that Taylor, has a romantic crush on Stephen King, it does seem that Hey Stephen was inspired by The Shining, and let me tell you why. First of all, you may be familiar with Tiffers and her account on here. She and I must have The Shining and be connected telepathically, because the last live book club that I did, where I announced we were reading The Shining, she was like at the same time creating and posting an entire video of like relating Taylor to The Shining. So if you haven't watched that and are finding this interesting, go back and watch like what she did too, because it is pretty interesting, and she does a lyric breakdown. I'm going to add to it. But okay, ready? Hey Stephen, I know looks can be deceiving, but I know I saw a light in you, which is interesting, because what is a light? It's a shine, and people who shine can see the shining in others. And I'm gonna say that Taylor probably thinks that she shines. We know she does, okay? I know looks can be deceiving, but I know I saw a light in you, because you shine too, and I can recognize it. As we walked, we would talk, and I didn't say half the things I wanted to, because if two people shine, they don't have to say the words out loud. They can just communicate telepathically. You don't have to say half the words that you wanted to. He knows what you're thinking already. They already know, okay? All of the girls tossing rocks at your window, I'll be the one waiting there, even when it's cold, because the entire Shining takes place in the winter, in like 10-degree weather. Hey Stephen, boy, you might have me believing I don't always have to be alone. Is that because you can see ghosts in the hotel, Taylor? Come feel this magic I've been feeling since I met you. Magic. It stands out to me. It definitely stands out to me. You know what it reminds me of is, so when that discussion when the chef, Dick Halloran, meets Danny and is like, hey, you have the shining and here's how it works. We can communicate telepathically. You're going to see things. I can see Taylor Swift taking that conversation of like two people who both shine being together and turning it into a love song, and then thinking that it's like really kitschy that it's also called Hey Stephen because Stephen King wrote The Shining. I will forever be convinced that that is where this song came from. 100% convinced. Some of the other lyrics in Guilty as Sin too, like just to call them out, because there's a lot. Oh my god, can you hear my stomach growl? I'm starving. Typewriter's not working. Typewriter. Keyboard. Man, maybe I'm losing my mind. Typewriters do look fun though. Okay. My boredom's bone deep, this cage was once just fine. Boredom, cabin fever, right? I'm seeing visions, am I bad or matter-wise? That's our entire like thesis statement. What if he's written mine on my upper thigh only in my mind? So what if all of this stuff is only happening in my mind? What does that actually mean? Like, what then? What if this place isn't haunted? One slip and falling back into the hedge maze. Oh, what a way to die. Hold on, I have to prove to TikTok I'm still here. There we go. Again, Jack actually dies in the hedge maze. And even though, just side note, even though there's not a hedge maze in the actual movie, it's the hedge animals that are like haunted and trying to kill everybody. You know how in the different variants that we get from Taylor, she had different imagery attached to each one. So there was a rabbit for one, there was an albatross for another one. I think there was a wolf for another one. Maybe it was a black dog reference. The third one wasn't an animal. It was just like a feather pen and an ink bottle. But I was looking at those and I'm like, those are like so very much like reminiscent of hedge animals. It also reminds me of Edward Scissorhand, which I was terrified of that movie as a kid. Okay, I keep recalling things we never did. Really stands out to me in this because she's not just saying like, I'm daydreaming about you and it feels real. She's saying what the visions I'm seeing in my mind feel so real that it's as if I'm recalling it from my own memory, which very much ties into the next verse where she says, if it's make-believe, why does it feel like a vow that we've both upheld somehow? If it's make-believe, why does it feel so real? Messy top lip kiss. I have to bring it up, you guys, because it is in the movie. And if I have to think about this every time I listen to the song, then you have to think about it too. The scene in the bathroom where there's like this like beautiful naked woman and Jack starts making out with her and then she turns into like the gross decaying old lady. Messy top lip kiss. I'm so sorry. I had to. Let's move on. But I'm so sorry. Without ever touching you, how can I be guilty if I never actually do anything wrong? These fatal fantasies, they don't know how you've haunted me so stunningly. If long-suffering propriety is what they want from me, that's what the hotel wants. They want long-suffering propriety. Traumatized. I know, I'm so sorry. I should have kept it to myself, but I can't. We need to all suffer together. The long-suffering propriety is what they want from me. That is what the hotel wants. To keep them forever. They don't know how you've haunted me so stunningly. I choose you and me religiously. And I actually think that this like very accurately depicts like Jack's descent into madness because he is trying to fight it a little bit. He comes to once in a while and he's like, no, I don't actually want to attack my family. I just keep doing it. And at a point actually, so in the book, in the movie, he's attacking everyone with an axe. In the book, it's like this, it's a roque mallet. It's basically like a croquet mallet, which is another Alice in Wonderland reference. So he's chasing them around with this like croquet mallet and he ultimately like turns it on himself, which is like this small glimpse into his sanity of like trying to spare his family and turning it on himself instead of them. Even though he's like a ghost and now totally possessed by the hotel. But I think this like, ultimately, I'm throughout the entire song thinking about doing it. I'm having intrusive thoughts about doing it. And finally, I choose you and me religiously. And finally, he gives into the hotel. Am I allowed to cry is actually a line that I have not decoded yet. I feel like it's very out of place in this song. If anybody has context to that, please let me know. Am I allowed to cry? Like she's thinking about hooking up with this guy, right? And an original meaning, I'm thinking about hooking up with this guy. And that is sinful in the eyes of the church and Jesus. If we think about dating someone like Maddie Healy and the reaction from the public, how she can never do anything right, she'll always be criticized. Am I allowed to cry? Am I allowed to be sad about something? I don't know. Fortnite's the other one that is just like, for me, I have not been able to totally decode. Grief and mourning from her previous relationships. Oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense, actually. Thank you. Like, almost like it's a, like a rebound in a way. Like, am I allowed to just be reckless for a little bit and grieve in the way that I see fit? In the same way that everybody else does? Fortnite actually has a lot of guilty as sin, or not guilty as sin, sorry, I'm just like, I can't multitask. Fortnite has a lot of Shining references as well. You're allowed to cry about a relationship everyone told you to avoid. Okay. Yeah, up in there. Grieve for something that isn't real. Oof. Oof. That hurts. You know what that reminds me of? One of my favorite lines she's ever written is in Ivy, the old widow goes to the stone every day, but I don't. I just sit here and wait, grieving for the living, which I think is very much related to this, like, not imaginary relationship she had in her head a la folklore, but, like, you know when, like, you fall in love with a fantasy, you maybe don't actually know someone really well, and so you kind of have this picture of who they are, and they usually end up being kind of disappointing, but, like, it's very easy to fall in love with something that you've created in your mind. What's that word? Limerence? Have you guys heard of limerence? I learned about this on TikTok recently. I've learned so much on this app. But limerence is, like, a really, like, extreme form of that, where it's, like, this obsession almost, when you actually, like, may take really harmful action to get what you want, but you think that you're, like, just in love with someone, like, in a very obsessive way. I feel that all over folklore. I don't think I've had limerence to, like, quite that extent, but, like, I'm a Libra. I live in my mind. Like, I know what it's like. I know what it's like to fall in love with someone that you've really just kind of made up because you don't know who they are, and they're actually not a great person anyway. Especially for someone as imaginative as Taylor, yeah. Okay, Fortnite connections to The Shining. The music video, the imagery is like... Okay, so it takes place in the Tortured Poets Department. Again, we have a tortured poet. Taylor describes the Tortured Poets Department as a government municipal building studying the minds of poets who are often thought of to be crazy. I'm seeing visions. Am I bad or mad or wise? It also looks like this psych center, right? So you can interpret some of the imagery as, like, they're doing experiments on her, maybe like a shock therapy. Actually, there's a scene where, because Danny keeps having these visions and he kind of, like, blacks out from reality, his parents take him to the doctor and they do an EEG on him. They hook him up to all of the wires. He has all the things stuck to his head, which is, like, very Fortnite music video of, like, what's going on with this kid? Like, is he crazy too? And then also, for anyone who knows me, you're gonna know how excited I was when I came across this. Page 159, Frankenstein imagery. So we read Frankenstein mainly because of the imagery in the Fortnite music video. And Stephen King writes, when describing Jack's persona, specifically how he goes into these fits of rage, he says, he could be a calm, undemanding figure in the classroom, but when the right set of competitive stimuli was applied, like electrodes to the temples of Frankenstein's monster, he could become a juggernaut. Frankenstein mentioned. I was so happy. So you have all of that, like, imagery just from that. She said I was a functioning alcoholic. We know Jack is a drunk. I love you. It's ruining my life. How have we not talked about this yet? Okay, again, this is another, like, prime example of how the references are more closely aligned to the movie. But think about Taylor in the music video. She's at the typewriter and she's just typing over and over again, I love you, it's ruining my life. I love you, it's ruining my life. I love you, it's ruining my life, over and over and over and over again. And in The Shining, Jack's working on his play, and when Wendy finds it, it is just a stack of papers that say, all work and no play make Jack a dull boy, over and over and over and over again. And I think back to whoever asked the question before of, like, is Taylor more of Jack or Wendy or Danny? That's going to seal the deal for me on her being a little bit more Jack than everybody else. Okay, I'm glad we eventually got there for you. Tangerine TV. Lovely. I, like, want a typewriter now. It looks fun. I don't know that I've ever even used one. Going back to the Fortnite lyrics, like, Your wife waters flowers. I want to kill her. My husband is cheating. I want to kill him. Like, it is very dark, and it's very The Shining. Like, relating that to The Shining is the only way I've been able to even, like, think I understand those lyrics. Like, is that the behavior? Is she actually crazy? Is she haunted by the Tortured Poets Department? I don't know. I don't know. I don't understand the Fortnite song. I'm going to be honest. I don't understand it. Okay, here's another thing. I thought of calling you, but you won't pick up. The phone lines are down. The phone lines are down in The Shining because of the snowstorm. But also, Jack, oh my god, we haven't even started with My Boy Only Breaks His Favorite Toys. But Jack breaks the CB radio, like the only other connection to the outside world that they have. Is this fan theory, or has Taylor said this? Because this is just me. This is just, I'm also crazy. So yeah, fan theory, I guess. I read the book. I highlighted all the things, all of the Taylor references. I made a 31 slide PowerPoint about it. This is just what goes on in my mind, okay? This is just, it's my hobby. Thank you. Thank you for your support, Kim. Book club for the win, yes. I get away with it by calling it a book club, but really it's just me being, am I bad or matter-wise? I don't know. I don't know. No, so I did not make it a Google. It's just for me to help me remember what I want to talk about. So it's not, I don't know how much value you guys would find in it, but I could think about putting it on there. The reading list is in a Google Doc. I could think about it. I don't know. I feel like I'd want to put a lot more work. I work in corporate America, which basically means I make PowerPoints all the time. So I feel like I would want to do a lot more work on it. I've already spent literal hours. I've probably spent like 6 hours just putting PowerPoint together. I don't know why I find this stuff fun, but it's, again, this is my hobby. You read it long ago. Yeah, it is a great reread. So this is not my first time reading it either. But it's funny because I read books and I'm not a saver. I like to get rid of things. The Shining is like one of the books that I've held on to for a really long time. Frankenstein too, randomly enough. Great Gatsby, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, like all of these books that she's referencing. I'm like, oh my god, we're the same person. It's a great reread. It really holds up. And I think you can read it through different lenses, too. Yes, incredibly meaningful. I get so much value and fulfillment out of it, which, you know, we've all probably gone through periods of time where I have felt no fulfillment out of anything. So this is like really fun for me. And then you find something, like realizing that this book takes place in the 1975, and it's just like, it just feels so good to find it. Okay, let's finish up Fortnite really quick. The paper swirling around them. The whole reason that Jack injures Danny is because Danny messed up his papers, and all I can see is like the Fortnite music video of all their papers swirling around them and then laying on top of their papers. It's very Fortnite. It's very Fortnite. Who's afraid of little old me? The imagery of Taylor in the castle, isolated in the Overlook Hotel. This mantra that keeps coming up over and over again, this inhuman place makes human monsters. This inhuman place makes human monsters, which is very, you caged me and then you called me crazy. Like, you did this to me. Laying in the middle of all the hurt. Yeah, oof. So unflinchingly depicting domestic violence as a stance in it. Yeah, for real. Yeah, there's a lot of, I ended up doing like a whole bunch of videos on My Boy Only Breaks His Favorite Toys because I was thinking about that so closely related to The Shining. And specifically, like, the biggest line that stood out to me was like, pull the string and I'll tell you that he runs because he loves me. Because, like, to imply that you're a pull string doll means that, like, you've been kind of brainwashed and programmed to think a certain way, to defend a person's actions despite how horrible they may be, and kind of going back over and over again, which obviously, like, Wendy stays with Jack, despite all of the horrible things that he's doing. And there's also this, like, generational trauma, like this cycle of abuse that is very much depicted in The Shining, like, both, like, Wendy's mom being, like, emotionally abusive, Jack's father being physically abusive, and that just, like, continuing down through generations. And, like, I don't know, it gives a lot more to the characters and their backgrounds. And actually, you know what it reminds me of is that, like, cycle of abuse type of concept actually very much reminds me of Fresh Out the Slammer. She's saying, like, now that I know that, like, what's at stake, I'm never going to do it again. Like, hey, I did my time. I'm free now. I've learned my lesson. I'm not going to make the same mistake again. And the production of that song is done in this way where, like, I don't know if you guys have, like, noticed this, maybe it's just me, but it's done in this way that, like, it almost has this foreshadowing that she will be a repeat offender, and that, like, she will go back. Like, she thinks she won't. She thinks everything is fixed, and that nothing else will happen again. But, like, especially at the end of the song where it, like, the tempo slows down a little bit, it gives this, like, kind of slow motion aspect to it that, like, you just feel this, like, sense of impending doom that, like, the cycle is actually going to repeat, which is very, very much in here. And actually, one of the reasons why he wrote the sequel to The Shining, Dr. Sleep, this actually very much stood out to me. This was at the end. He said, every now and then someone would ask whatever happened to Danny from The Shining. When the idea of the sequel would pop up in my mind, I would think, well, now Danny's 20 or now he's 25, and I wonder if he's drinking like his father. Finally, I decided, okay, why don't I use that in a story and just revisit that whole issue, like father, like son? Which is, like, feels like a punch to the gut. So yeah, those, like, there's a lot of that in here, which again is, like, okay, is he bad or mad or wise? Like, what excuses does he have for his behavior? And, like, part of that is how he was brought up and how we know that impacts people in their future. Not that it is an excuse or not. And of course, there are plenty of people that don't repeat that cycle. But it is an attempt from the author to make you think a little bit more about, like, what is motivating his behavior. And I think this idea also of, like, who is a reliable narrator, which is, like, one of my favorite things that comes up in, like, TV or movies or books, of, like, who can we actually rely upon to understand what is happening? And none of them are really a reliable narrator. You have Danny, who's a 5-year-old. 5. And one of the things that stands out to me in that, like, they keep talking about the presidential suite in the hotel, but when Danny talks about it, it's spelled SWEET because he doesn't understand what a suite in a hotel is. And then you have Jack, who is, like, losing his mind and or under the influence of something. So it makes you think. And I think one of the things that is, like, very haunting and horrific and unsettling about it is that, like, there is no good answer. It's just fucked up. Jack's rage is described as a single sick chord, like an out-of-tune piano. And he describes himself as mean as a snake with shingles. Ugh. Ugh. Dark. Dark, dark, dark. Are any of us reliable narrators of our own life? Wow, this is what we are in book club for. No, we're not. Easy answer, no. Do you know how many times, like, have you ever had any conversations with, like, a parent or, like, just someone in your family about events that had happened, especially as a kid? Like, the way that I'll tell a story about something that happened when I was like in high school, and my mom will be like, that's not how it happened. And I'm like, what do you mean? That's exactly how it happened. And she's like, no, it's not. And she'll tell me all these other details. But like our memories of our own lives are not very strong. I don't remember a ton of my life. So no, I know that I am not a reliable narrator, and yet it is my reality and therefore is real, which is another thing that I thought about this entire book. Like, even if he's mad, even if there are mental health issues, if that is what the person is perceiving and experiencing, it is real to them, right? So we need receipts. Yeah, for sure. It makes me want to like journal more, but I'm not consistent. I showed you guys the journal that I wrote my reactions to when I was listening to Tortured Poets, to help me process it. This was on April 19th. This is the next day. There's nothing else there. I haven't written it since. Oh well. That's all right. I can live in my own mind. It's great up here. Conversation sparkling. Also, while we're on the topic of trauma, really interesting. There is a mention of a character named Robin. And I have been like in the Reddit threads. I have been deep into The Shining, which like if you need a hole to go down that like is not Taylor Swift related, there is so much here. It's really interesting to hear other people's perspectives. But anyway, there's not a lot to talk about Robin. Robin, obviously, a song on the Tortured Poets department. This character in the book, it's mentioned for like 1 or 2 pages. It is a little boy that goes to school with Danny. Robin's father is also a teacher at the school, just like Danny's father is an English teacher at the school. And Danny learns that Robin's father lost his marbles, was like sent away, taken away by the men in white coats. And so Danny has this image of like what it means to lose your mind, to lose your marbles at a very young age because of his school friend or schoolmate, classmate, Robin. And again, like just like thinking about that innocence aspect, the entire song of Robin is about innocence and like protecting a young child in sweetness, hiding those horrible secrets from a child in sweetness. And Danny is processing this boy kind of losing access to his father in these terms that are not actually what's happening. I lost his marbles. Like, he doesn't really know what that means. He was taken away by men in white coats, right? It's like dumbed down in a way to like protect him from the idea of like what it means to lose your mind, especially as his father is like struggling with things. So I don't know, that stood out to me. I was like, there's a Wendy and now there's a Robin in here. Like, yeah, the scene where he wakes up from the nightmare dream and he's freaking out, how Danny walks in the room and his mother tries to protect him. Exactly. And I think part of the reason why Danny can like is like not as susceptible to the hotel and this stuff is that like, interestingly enough, he does have a greater understanding of some things that his parents don't. He's able to look at these horrible images that he's seeing in the hotel and be like, he can talk himself down and be like, no, I know this isn't real. And it prevents the hotel from like getting inside of him, essentially. Whereas like Jack, who should be like an adult, who should have reason, can't. And so it's like, are we really protecting? I'm not a mother. Are we really protecting our children? How much are we protecting them when, you know, they say that kids are like much smarter than usually people give them credit for. Yeah, for sure. Want to talk about elevators? Because of course Wendy is absolutely terrified of the elevator, and we know Taylor Swift is also scared of elevators. Is Jack reincarnated every time? Why is he in the picture at the end? The movie and the book are very different, so it can be difficult to speak to. My interpretation of the book is that Wendy kills him, and he is able to still be on the attack because all of the ghosts at this point are very real to them. They can see everything that's happening. And so even though Jack is a ghost and is now going to be at the hotel forever, presumably, just like all of the other people that died there, because the hotel has this very in-depth history that the book goes into. And for better, I guess for lack of a better word, and it's the word that they use the entire time, the hotel has a really bad reputation. And so all the people that have died there stay in the hotel, and they now haunt this hotel. So I think it's kind of related in that same way. I think there are a lot of things that the movie does that they just give no context to that the book actually explains a little bit better. But anyway, I think he's in the picture at the end because that's the masquerade ball, right? That's the party that is happening at the hotel. It's all of the people that have died there that the hotel has consumed and now uses to collect more humans. So yeah, I think he's in the picture at the end because those are all of the ghosts from the masquerade ball. It's my interpretation. I don't know Hotel California. The trauma yeah, that's another great, yeah, exactly. It just, it moves to another form of generational trauma. The masquerade ball, yeah. Wow, interesting. Again, cycles of abuse. You know how afraid I am of elevators, never trust them if they rise too fast. So elevator plays a big role in the book as well. So like, first of all, Wendy is terrified of the elevator, mainly because she thinks like if they all go into the elevator together and it gets stuck, like there's no one else in the hotel to save them. They'll just be trapped in there. So like she makes everyone promise to use the stairs the entire time. So when the elevator starts moving on its own because of the ghosts, that's a pretty haunting moment in the book. But also, Elevator is the name of a game that Jack used to play with his father, where he would basically just like run to his father and his father would like hoist him up into the air like an elevator. But there were moments where he let go and Jack was injured. There's a good quote on this. It's like kind of devastating, but page 329. Again, cycles of abuse, things going up and down over and over and over again, continuing over and over and over again. You know, I use these little tabs, but oh God, this is so sad. He talks about his mother just staying with them because his mother was a nondescript woman who rarely spoke above a mutter, only suffered him because of her Catholic upbringing, saying that she must. Which is very, but daddy, I love him. Do what you're told type of thing, even if for better or worse. So his father would sweep him into his arms, and Jackie would be propelled deliriously upward, crying, "Elevator, elevator." But then he lets go. It had not seemed strange that his own love should go hand in hand with his fear of the elevator game, which might end in a splintering crash on any given night. Yikes. What is Hotel California? I thought it was a song. Is it the song? What are we talking about? Is that a book? Oh, the song. Oh, I never really, I guess, thought about it. I mean, I've definitely, I've heard it. I know it. You check in, but you never check out. Oh. Literally never thought about this. Okay, I'm gonna take some time on this one. Bring your alibis. That's funny. We're all just prisoners here of our own device. Ooh, interesting. They just can't kill the beast. Very similar. Okay. Some real quick other random things. We gotta talk about the number 13. Because why not? The movie was released nationally on Friday, June 13th, 1980. Very similarly, Taylor releases her Eras Tour movie on none other than my birthday, Friday, October 13th. The fact that horror movies moved their dates of release for her, iconic. They filmed the movie for 13 months straight. The hedge mazes in the movie were 13 feet tall. There was no floor 13 or room 13 in the hotel because of superstition. And the work that Jack was working on, the play that he wanted to write while he was there over the winter to get away from all and focus on, was his 13th work. He had published 12 short stories before then. Oh, Florida is also really funny too. A number of the ghost scenes in Florida are Danny or Wendy or Jack are locked in the bathroom with the ghosts, and it is quite literally barricaded in the bathroom with a bottle of wine. Me and my ghosts, we've had a hell of a time. Hilarious. Also, the chef who shines and comes back to save them at the end, he goes to Florida each winter to escape Colorado, the proverbial shitstorm back in Texas, the snowstorm back in Colorado. Oh, you guys are really smart. This is great. I'm just going to read your comments. I'm going to let you guys have it. Okay. Reputation real quick. I'm just going to kind of burn through some of these other references quick. Because it's noon. Oh my God. So, Reputation, the dead woman lying in the bathtub. The old Taylor can't come to the phone right now because she's dead, literally lying in the bathtub in the Look What You Made Me Do music video. That stood out to me. A lot of snake references, like the fire hose on the wall. They kept seeing it as a snake. What else? Just the titles. The titles of the chapters were also very, very Taylor. We have the phone booth, the front porch light, the hedges, the elevator, Florida, daylight, midair, and Wendy. Once I got to the daylight chapter, I was like, you're just fucking with me now. There's Tony's 11 years old. That's Tia's 11. What else? A snowmobile accident. Truman Capote stayed in one of the rooms once. It's a Matty Healy reference. A lot of hand on the throttle references. Everything he touched turned to gold. One of the prior owners of the hotel's name is Archer. Houghton? Archer? That was a coroner's name, I'm sorry. He ruled to death an accidental death. It's just very much all the king. That was a coroner's name, I'm sorry. He ruled to death an accidental death. It's just very much all the king's horses, all the king's men couldn't put me together again. There's a lot of these. Oh, okay. This was one of my favorite lines. It's one of my favorite lines. This has really nothing to do with anything, but he's saying that he's busy, and he says, I'm as busy as a cat in a mess of guitar strings. It's giving Benjamin Button just like crawling across the piano, you know? I'm as busy as a cat in a mess of guitar strings. We have to start using that. My husband's trying to figure out why I'm taking notes. Oh, that's so funny. I love it. I still have like, there's a lot of this that I just, October's been really busy for me. It's almost over, thank God, but I haven't made as many TikTok videos as I've wanted to, so I will probably make a handful of videos about this stuff to still post, just so like I have it and to finish it out, but I just like, I went a whole week where I just like didn't have the energy to like put it all together. Oh, what did I miss? Okay, down bad references. Jack's drink of choice in the book. Jack's drink of choice is martinis. He calls them Martians because they have power over him. In the movie, he drinks whiskey. In the book, he drinks Martians. And when he sees Lloyd, the bartender, which I interpret as like Jack's version of Danny, because actually there's not supposed to be any alcohol in the hotel, which is like a big piece that I left out of the synopsis, sorry. He's like, 18 months sober and he goes to a hotel and like, they're like, great, there's not gonna be any temptation because there's no alcohol in the hotel, but the ghosts give him alcohol. And when he orders a martini, he orders a Martian. Not to mention, from Down Bad, they'll say I'm nuts if I talk about the existence of you. More references to being crazy, more references to questioning the existence of something. A lot of clock imagery. I know we talked about like the countdown. Yeah, Taylor loves an old fashioned. Again, related to the movie. I'm not sure that she ever read this book. I think she's read a lot, but now I'm questioning it. Yeah, I know. Sometimes when I don't drink a whole lot. I used to. I stopped for a while. Drink once in a while now. And one day my husband drinks whiskey and I was like, I just feel like Taylor and I would never be friends because I'm not cool enough to drink whiskey straight. It'll just never be me. I'll never be that cool. I will never be that cool. Things can change. Taste change, they say, right? I don't know. Do I want to try to like whiskey? It just seems like a waste of time. If you already said this, what is the next book? Okay, let's do a book announcement. Because we do announce it here. Okay. Stay with me. A little bit of a change. The next book is going to be Peter Pan. And I don't know if people are going to be excited about this or not. I'm a little hesitant because like it is like mostly it's a book. It's more of an actual novel than I was anticipating picking up Peter Pan. But just every time we read something, I find connections back to Peter Pan. And I mentioned this earlier. I did some foreshadowing myself where like even in Cardigan, I've been finding like way more Peter Pan references. I don't even know this story. I know about it just like as it exists culturally, but I've never read the book. I probably saw the movie when I was a little kid. I don't remember liking it. So I don't know it. And I just think there's going to be so much here that we find. And I'm also happy that it's only 150 pages. The Shining was 660 pages. So I think it'll give me a little bit more time to like maybe do a little bit more with it, find more. And if I do have more time, which I probably will because we have all month for November, there are some poems that I haven't really dug into yet that Taylor references, some Sylvia Plath poems that I might take some time to do since those are just poems and not giant novels. So I'm excited about this one. Also just like how beautiful is this book. It's so pretty. So yeah, we're doing Peter Pan. I think it's going to be good. Alice in Wonderland is a cool parallel. It makes sense to pair those together. Okay, maybe we'll do that. I know Alice's Adventures in Wonderland very, very well. I have one of the illustrations of Alice looking up at the Cheshire Cat literally tattooed all over my side. The original illustration, not the Disney side. If you have a Disney Alice, that's fine. It's just not what I have, and I like to make sure people know. Yeah, it's long. I tried to read it. I got like 500 pages in and I quit. I couldn't do it. I got bored. We will definitely, yeah, Alice is on the list. You know, I haven't found much of a reference in Tortured Poets specifically. That might not actually be on my list, but obviously she references it in a lot of other ways. So we could definitely do that. Through the Looking Glass would be interesting, but I think most people are familiar with the Alice's Adventures in Wonderland story. I don't think a lot of people are like familiar with Through the Looking Glass, and I think there's probably a lot more there, especially considering Taylor walks through the mirror in the Lover House. I've read a number of other Stephen King books, but not Pet Sematary. I remember watching that movie as a kid. Most of my horror movie watching days was like, I was a child and should not have been watching those, but alas. All I remember is the Achilles heel scene from that movie. Okay, Dr. Susan is in for Peter Pan and Alice. I never do them outside of this related to Taylor. See, and that's why we have book club, because it's going to make us read things that we wouldn't before. There's a lot to learn from it. Okay, you guys have really... I love Alice so much, I have multiple copies of it. So I will try to do both in November, but no promises, because if I feel good about it now, I don't know. You know, some days you wake up and you just can't. I don't know how many of those days I'm going to have in November. So I will commit to Peter Pan for now, and attempt to pair it with Alice in Wonderland. When do I go live usually? So I try to do book club the last Sunday of every month. Unless I'm like running out of time or something, then I'll change it. I do always schedule it and I do an announcement. So like I'll schedule the live a few days ahead of time. So you'll see it on my page, but it's usually the last Sunday of every month, 10:30 Eastern, because I'm a morning gal. I will go live sometimes in other cases if I'm like bored and want to chat, or sometimes if I'm like prepping, like making the PowerPoint or whatever, I'll just hop on live and kind of chat with people as I go through it. Yeah, November gets busy with the holiday. That's also why I liked the idea of a short book. Yes, exactly. You get me. Dr. Susan gets me. Anything that Dr. Susan signs off on, we're doing. She's the real chairman here. So she signed off on Peter and Alice, so that's what we're going to do. I do follow you. I somehow haven't seen you in a minute. Yeah, TikTok is so weird. It drives me nuts. Because, like, you'll follow someone and they'll just stop showing up on your For You page. And I don't know how you guys use TikTok, but, like, I pretty much only scroll the For You page. I almost never go to my following feed. There is a following feed, and you'll just see the videos from following. And so I know it doesn't always work when I'm just like, hey, something's happening in 2 days. Like, you just might not see it ever, or you might not see it for a week. So yeah, just keep an eye out. Last Sunday of every month is usually when I'm here. Or just, I don't know, search for me once in a while. But hopefully I show up more, interact with the content. That always helps too. But yeah, sometimes I go to like my list of who I'm following, and I'm like, wow, I haven't seen these people in ages. Whatever happened to them? Somebody have to look at it. So I did put the live book club that I did for just kids on YouTube, because TikTok allows you to download your live videos. So it's like not the best quality, like visually, just because I like downloaded it and then re-uploaded it, but I wanted to keep it somewhere. So if you want to watch that, I made a Tortured Poets YouTube, just to store those there for anyone that does want to go back. So throw that on in the car. That was a really good one too. Just Kids was very, very sad. I don't cry at a lot of books, and I really wasn't expecting it to get me, but I was just like, I got to the point where she talked about how she never traveled with Robert, and they just, like, their whole lives were just in New York City, and they never, like, got to see the rest of the world together, and I just started sobbing uncontrollably. Oh, that was a really good book. It was really, really good. I both listened to it and read it, like, at the same time. Awesome. Yeah, a podcast is something I would love to have, but just seems like it requires a little too much work. This is just easier. Just hop on. Hop on, chit chat, get out. Okay, you guys, I don't know if I have anything else. I'm sure there's little tidbits in here that we could find, but oh god, no, sorry, we're not ending yet. We have to talk about Shelley Duvall. So referenced this earlier, but there are 4 different, like, main themes that I have found. I haven't read everything, but mostly found in the 50 plus books that Taylor references throughout Tortured Poets. So I like to go through those at the end of book club just to rate things. One of them is highlighting women's stories, and I think this is another reason why Taylor might be referencing more of the movie than what happens in the book, because there is, like, the domestic violence aspect of it, but I think drawing some attention to Shelley Duvall and her story is something. I can't say that Taylor wanted us to do that, but, like, I do feel like she did. Shelley Duvall plays Wendy in The Shining. Here she is. She does an amazing job. And I think one of the things that Taylor highlights specifically is the mistreatment of women in Hollywood. She talks about it a lot in Tortured Poets, and a lot of the works that she references talk about it. And so I wanted to at least bring her up. In The Shining specifically, she says that it was overall a good experience. I don't buy it. There is a documentary that they did about the filming of The Shining, and Stanley Kubrick is, like, classically known for retaking shots, like filming scenes, as many times as he sees fit. And one of the most classic scenes is Wendy, Shelley Duvall, with a baseball bat, like, kind of backing up the stairs slowly as Jack is coming after her. And they shot that 127 times. They also shot it, the entire movie, sequentially. So that way, like, as the movie goes on, and as Wendy specifically, well, in Jack too, I guess, like, loses his mind, descends into madness, they get, like, more tired, and you can, like, see them unraveling on screen, because they're also partly unraveling in life. And Shelley Duvall doesn't seem to have anything negative to say about the director, but also, like, did women in the 70s feel comfortable speaking out against the abuse that they got in Hollywood from the men who were running it? Like, no, probably not. Or, like, could she even recognize it? Because sometimes you don't recognize it. I don't like it. Is my opinion. She had to just, like, cry and sob every day. There are reports of her, like, running out of tears. I can imagine how many cigarettes she had to smoke on set during that whole movie. And they just, like, they wore her down over and over and over again. And it's like, if you have to physically do that to a person to, like, get your right, that's not acting anymore. Like, you're hiring actors for a reason. Let them act. You don't need to, like, beat someone down for 13 months to get a shot of them in desperation. So R.I.P. Shelley. She had nice things to say, and she said she wouldn't do it again, but she has fond memories. The other thing that is really, really horrible about this story, which you guys may know this, but she was struggling with mental health issues towards the end of her life, and went on Dr. Phil, not a doctor, Dr. Phil. And he, like, she was clearly not mentally okay. She was saying some, disturbing things that were very detached from reality. And he tried to like look like a good guy for trying to help her, and really he wanted views for his show. And so he got a lot of flack from like the public about it, but he still had his show for a long time after that. And it's just like so sad that she was exploited. She got so much criticism. There are a lot of criticism about her looks too. I think she's like a beautiful woman. She's like clearly very talented, and to just be used and like not thought of as human for the men in Hollywood, it's fucking disgusting. And unfortunately, I think one of the things that Tortured Poets highlights is that women are very much treated very similarly now to when they were, even way back when. Not a lot has changed, unfortunately. There is a girl on here that I found recently, just looking around at Shelley Duvall stuff. She runs an account called the Shelley Duvall Archives, and she's like a Shelley Duvall stan. She became friends with Shelley towards the end of her life and helped her with some of the basic needs that she needed and couldn't do for herself towards the end of her life, which is really great. She celebrated her last birthday together with her, and she has like an amazing archive of like all of Shelley's work and different like photo shoots and things that they've done back in the day, which is really nice to like go back through. So if you're not following her, if you haven't seen her, at least go look her up and scroll through her stuff, because it's a good trip. It's a really good trip. So R.I.P. Shelley, we love you. The other scales are New York versus London. Usually each, like Peter Pan, like obviously London. The Shining isn't so much New York or London. Usually where like New York is not featured, it's New England. And I will say that Jack and his family, Jack was born in New Hampshire. He worked in Vermont, and they moved from Vermont to Colorado. So we do have some New England there. Jack and Wendy also honeymooned together in New York City for their honeymoon. So it's not the most present, but it is on the scale. It's maybe like a 1 out of 5 on the scale, but it's on the scale. They're at least from New England. Mental health being highlighted. 10 out of 10, obviously. And then upper class society and isolation. Obviously huge themes of isolation. The high society thing, I mean, it takes place at a very, very rich hotel, and the masquerade ball that takes place there is very high society. Again, not a 5 out of 5, but still on the scale. We're counting it. We're counting it as meeting all requirements to be on our reading list. Yes, and Stephen King is from New England. Perfect. Yes, yes, yes. I love Maine. I want to move to Maine. Maybe one day. I'm in New York. I'm not like that far. It's like a 5-hour drive. Where do I get the requirements? Here. So the list of the reading list is linked in my bio. It's just a Google Doc. I haven't formally outlined like each 4 of those things and how I just have been rating them live as we meet. But a lot of them do, if you go think about it, if you want to rate them yourself. Maybe I'll do that one day. There's just so many of them that every time I'm like, oh, I'll do a series where I talk about all of the books. It's like, oh my God, there's 50. But a lot of the, I can try to build out the Google Doc is really what I should do. So the Google Doc has the list of books, and each book has associated the songs that are most closely aligned. And I need to build it out more. I actually haven't updated it. It's in September, so if you go in there, it's a little outdated. I'll get to it. The songs that are associated, that gets built out as I read the books and find more songs. And then where the references come from of like why they're on the list to begin with, which is usually a Taylor lyric that like leads us back to Tortured Poets and the book itself. I should add more to it to maybe add in the themes. And I guess it doesn't have to be like 100% complete. I could like do it over time. That's really what I should do. I'm a perfectionist, so it gets in the way. Like if I'm just like, if I can't do all 50, then I won't do it. I'll work on it. We'll see. You guys are too nice. All right, it's been 2 hours, which is shocking. Time flies by on live. Yeah, I'll try to build out the one that's in it's a matter of sitting down and doing it, you know? There's so much going on. Peter Pan is only 150 pages. I'll have time in November. Okay. Love you, everybody. Thank you for being here. Thank you for adding your thoughts. I also learned stuff here today too, so that's what it's all about. If you haven't followed already, please follow. Please tell your friends. I am like so close to 10,000 followers, which is when I can start making playlists, which will make it way easier for like the people that missed the Just Kids Live. A lot of the stuff that I talked about is already like in my TikTok, and I can just make a playlist. So tell your friends, we're gonna get there. We'll get there one day. All right, bye guys. Happy Sunday.